You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into this podcast and putting it into your favorite podcast player, putting it in your car, and just, listening to your heart's content. I do appreciate that immensely. I know it may sound like I'm a little sarcastic, but I am not. I really do appreciate that. I have a great episode because this band just released a new record that I am absolutely in love with. The band is called Anxious, and I have the singer of the band, Grady Allen, on this particular show. He is a Connecticut dude, and he loves hardcore, and he loves independent music. And this chat was really, really fun because we're catching Anxious on their upside right now. Like they're climbing up the mountain, about ready to put on their skis and head on down in a positive way. Like that makes them sound like they're on the decline. That is not the case. But they have just recently put out a record on Run for Cover called Little Green House. I absolutely adore it. I've been fortunate enough to have it in my digital listening platform for quite some time. And man, the record is just so, so good. And I was excited to have Grady. So we had this discussion a few weeks ago. He was actually getting over a cold. So if he sounds a little bit stuffy, if you know him, for those of you that don't know him, you will notice no difference whatsoever. But I just wanted to put that out there. But let's talk about things you can do for me. Because after all, that is what we are here for, right? No, this is just for your enjoyment. But I would love it if you are listening on Spotify. If you tap that star rating button, it helps out this show. And I know it sounds like every podcast asks you to do that, but there's a reason why. So do that, please. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, I would love a review. I would love stars, whatever you feel like that is not a big lift for you. You can just do it really easily. I would appreciate that. And also, later on this week, I'm going to be publishing a bonus episode of a podcast that I worked on very hard from an executive producer standpoint, which that's just a fancy way of saying I worked really hard on this thing. For those of you that care about Under Oath, they just released a new record. I released a podcast with them with a bunch of other talented people that are hosting it and doing a lot of behind the scenes work, but I'm really proud of it. And I want, for those of you that care about Under Oath, and even if you don't care about Under Oath, but you're like, oh man, I liked them like 10 or 15 years ago, this is a great way to re-engage with Under Oath. So go to your favorite podcast platform after you're done listening to this particular episode and just type in Under Oath podcast and you'll be able to find that. It's called Labeled Deep Dive Series and Under Oath. And basically we look at the history of the band through the prism of their new record, Voyeurs, that just came out. And I'm incredibly proud of it. There's 2 episodes that are up right now. And check it out. I would appreciate that immensely. So that's what we got. Let's talk to Grady, because like I said, I just love Anxious. I love this band. And he also played in One Step Closer for a while. He had to kind of step down because clearly both of those bands are doing a lot right now and it would be impossible to juggle both. So we talk about that in this interview. But I just love Anxious. Grady, great guy. He does a physical newsletter that he mails out to people called Dying Tradition. We actually talk about that towards the, I think the tail end of this particular interview. But he just, he loves hardcore, loves punk, loves the independent music scene. So here we go. Here is Anxious. And I will talk to you, of course, you at your live show at a program where I said I am a large fan of the band that you do and both bands that you do for that matter. I admittedly got into your stuff with the New Shape single because the previous stuff didn't necessarily grab me. It was just one of those things. Like I was like, oh, Anxious is cool, but it just didn't resonate with me. And I'm sure this is interesting for you because, as a young musician yourself, where you have watched bands kind of evolve and grow over time, you and your friends, both not only with Anxious, but One Step Closer as well, are like growing up in front of all of our eyes musically.
Yeah.
So is that, I'm sure it's fun for you guys to obviously do kind of, what you feel passionate about, but isn't it interesting for you, that kind of concept of like, oh, this is where Anxious was, 2 years ago. And like, now here's where we are now because we're a little bit older.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing for sure. And it's both very cool and like a little bit, I don't know. It's sometimes hard to not feel a little bit self-conscious just because sometimes, I don't know, it's, especially the older Anxious material. Like I wish like I could preface all of it like on recording by being like, hey, we were like 16 when we recorded this. Like,
Right.
Don't, like, if you're not impressed or you don't like it, like just know like we had no idea what we were doing. Blah, 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 blah. But no, it's a weird phenomenon to be like, I don't know, to kind of be figuring out all of this stuff. Because to me, it's, even, now having like an LP under our belt, at least recorded and stuff, it still feels like we're very much figuring all this stuff out. And so it's both very flattering that there's people around that care and are interested in like this phase where I'm still like, no, we're still like totally figuring this out. We have no idea what we're doing. And it's both also like intense of like, oh wow, like there are a lot of eyes on us right now and we're still figuring it out.
Right. No, I appreciate the articulation of the self-consciousness, because I do, even as you're releasing stuff to, your friends and your local, DIY community, it still feels, you're like, oh my gosh, like, what are people going to think about our demo? Like, you just think about all of these steps. And then as it kind of fractures out, where it's like, there are people who I will have no relationship with beyond just them maybe coming to a show or just buying my record. And then that's kind of all they know about me. But I do like that idea of at the beginning of every recording where it's like time stamping it. This was released in 2020. Like, just, I just want you guys to know this is when it came out.
Yeah. No, it's giving everybody some context, just where we were at that point.
Yeah, for sure. For sure too. And kind of putting the focus on you as a person, were you actually born and raised in Connecticut, or where did you, I know that's like sort of simple biographical stuff, but I wasn't able to do my online sleuthing and find out.
Yeah. So no, I moved to Connecticut right before I started middle school. So that makes me about 10 years old when I moved here. I was actually born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I moved around the country a whole bunch before I turned 10. So I was born in Oklahoma. Then I lived in Dallas for a while. Then I lived up in the New York area for a little bit, and then just kind of bumped around a whole bunch of places just for my parents' job. And then right when I was about 10 years old, we landed in Connecticut, and I've been here ever since.
What was with the, I guess, moving around, like you said, with your parents' occupation? Was it, some people presume that usually when you move around like that, you're part of the military. Was that the case, or?
No, parents are not military. Both of them were attorneys or are attorneys.
Okay.
They were just moving around a lot for
pursuing opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm going to guess that, Oklahoma is, not the cultural hotbed of America. Did you, I guess, do you have any memories of Oklahoma? I know you're obviously young, but do you have any memories of that place?
Almost all of my family on my dad's side is from Oklahoma. So much of my childhood years were spent in Oklahoma and in the Norman area, just seeing my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. So I've spent a lot of time in Oklahoma. I actually have an affinity for it, but that's probably an affinity that only comes from like these short controlled bursts that I visit there. I think if I was like consistently living there, I would be going, wow, I would really love to leave this place. So
right.
So yeah, I have spent a lot of time in Oklahoma, and I actually quite like it there. In the time that I do spend there.
Sure. No, that's cool that you, because I do think that people that have experiences of different living spaces within, rural, country, city, like just have those touch points where you're able to look at the world beyond just what your immediate experience is valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's, obviously I've lived for, a little more than half my life at this point, all in Connecticut. But I think it's, it's definitely valuable to have been able to see those different parts of the country and such.
With and so, what was the family structure like growing up, as far as brothers and sisters in the house as well?
Mm-hmm. I have one older brother, who's a year and a half older than me. And we've always been super close. And I mean, he's, we've always lived together, until pretty recently. He just, got a job in the city. And so I think he'll be, moving out pretty soon, but as of right now, we're still living together.
Got it. And I'm going to guess, just like from my own personal experience in traveling through Connecticut, it's very suburban from that perspective. Like there, yes, there are large cities there, but it's all pretty spread across. Was your getting raised in Connecticut, I guess, symbolic of that experience?
I mean, my being raised in Connecticut, I mean, it's definitely a suburban experience. I live in a town called Darien, which is a very small suburban town. Yeah, I mean, all the time that I've spent in Connecticut, it's just living it's been a very suburban experience. Yeah,
got it. And from the little I know of you as a human being beyond what you share online and obviously through your bands, you seem like a pretty easygoing dude, and what I would maybe kind of define as more of a West Coast personality in regards to like, oh yeah, pretty chill dude, pretty easygoing. Is that reflective of what you kind of understand yourself to be, or is that something that you've kind of grown into as you get older?
I'm flattered by that observation. I would say that I'm pretty easygoing, pretty relaxed most of the time. I think, whether I would tie that to a West Coast attitude, I don't know. I like the West Coast a whole bunch. I think I like it in the capacity that I visit. I don't think I would ever want to live on the West Coast, but I think the sort of easygoing West Coast attitude is probably one that I identify with. I'm sorry, there was a second part of that question.
No.
Have I grown into that, or
yeah.
Geez, I think with each passing year, I grow a little bit more into it. I think a lot of my childhood years and teen years, I was pretty uptight, but I think as more and more time passes, I think I've become a little bit easier going.
Sure.
Just a little bit more relaxed.
Right. Well, and plus, I mean, everything is life or death as you are growing through, junior high, high school. Like it's either this or that. Like there's no gray area. And so
yeah,
and that's part of the experience, because I don't think if you approach that with the same attitude, like you probably, might not get things done in some capacity.
Sure. Yeah.
And so as you started to, set roots in Connecticut and have the experience of, going to school and all that sort of stuff, what kind of kid did you find yourself being? Were you attracted to sports, or was music always kind of the thing? Where did you find yourself experimenting with?
Yeah. So, I was never drawn to sports. Didn't have a distaste for it, really. I just, was never really gravitated towards it. It's funny. I'm not distinctly competitive, in a lot of ways, and sort of the way that sports are blatantly very life and death competitive just never really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. So, in that capacity, no, I was never really drawn to sports. Music was always something that really fascinated me. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 7 years old. Always really enjoyed playing it. When I was in middle school, I discovered Blink-182, and that kind of set off and other things within that vein, and that kind of sparked a love or a passion to like, oh, I want to play in a band, and like having aspirations in that field. I guess thinking of things that I was doing in junior high and high school, Um, heavily involved in theater, in dramatics and stuff at my high school. Did a lot in middle school and in high school. Did a lot of that, and that was kind of my big school activity.
Yeah, your extracurricular, as it were.
Yes, yeah. And then
what was the biggest production that you did as far as a role was concerned? Where it's like, were you Betty from the West Side Story or whatever? Like, did you do any of those type of plays?
Yeah. I mean, I did lots of dramas and musicals. I mean, I guess my favorite role, I guess, that I ever got to do is I got to do the role of the narrator in Our Town, which is
sure.
Which I really like that play a whole lot. So I got to do that my senior year. So that was really fun. So yeah, I guess if I had to narrow it down into like one role that I particularly loved, it would be that.
Well, that's cool. I do think that there is that when kids get attracted to theater and understand that there's like this, real secret society that exists within each production, where it's like, yes, you of course have your classmates that are participating in, the plays that you're doing, but then, when you bring something like that to life and then you get to invite your parents and maybe some of your friends come to check you out, and it's just like, whoa, look at Grady just doing that thing like that. I didn't expect that out of him, or, something along those lines.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought, it took a long time for me to think it was cool or enjoy it. I mean, I was literally like almost borderline ashamed of it in high school, especially when I started like, doing Anxious and One Step Closer more seriously. It was like this, oh God, I would fucking rather die than like someone that like I go to shows with or something, find out that I like do this at my high school or something. But the truth is I really enjoyed it and had a good time doing it. So no, I mean, I think it's I had a lot of fun with it, and I mean, I think it is the putting on a production and like working with a narrative and thinking about how to articulate it in a cool, interesting way it's a really cool exercise. It's a really cool activity. So
sure,
I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did it as well, because I think it is. I mean, it is valuable too to be able to build that level of confidence, either earned or unearned, of just getting on a stage and being some different version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny too that you articulated that idea of that, never the two streams shall cross, of like, okay, yes, here's my punk and hardcore world, and then here is my theater world, because I do think that the common conceit now is that people, generically speaking, are more acceptive over these kind of these proverbial archetypes of like, oh, here's the theater kids, like let's beat them up or whatever. Not saying that's what your friends were saying, but just like in general, people are more accepting. But it's just funny that like even we're of a large age gap here. I'm 40 years old and I know you're around 20, so it's just funny that there was still that thing in your head where it's like, oh yeah, the kids that are going out to local shows, like they don't necessarily need to know that I'm doing Our Town or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was something I was always, I mean, I don't know. I always considered like the stuff I was doing outside of school was like, that's my real life. That's like who I really am. And like the stuff I was doing in school was like, yeah, that's stuff I'm doing in school. So I don't know. I don't think I ever really even saw it with like the same legitimacy that like I saw like, playing an Anxious show or a One Step Closer show. That's real. Doing this at my high school, that's just high school. Whatever.
Right.
So, yeah. So I never even really saw them in the same plane. And whether that's right or wrong, or I don't really know. But
yeah, they were just two separate tracks. I get it. Like you weren't. Yeah. Like, yes, maybe a part of it was the fear of judgment, but it was mostly just like, oh yeah, these two things are set. Like, yes, of course I'm going to be wearing, whatever, a Bane shirt to school or what have you. But like, that's all that the crossover is going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Especially too, where the idea of, as you start to develop relationships at your school, and then obviously have like your clique of friends that might be into the same stuff, where everybody else is kind of like, what is Grady and all of his friends are into? Like, what are they wearing all these bands? What is this stuff?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Merch. It's important in this independent music world to choose your vendors wisely. And rockabilia.com is my favorite vendor on the internet for band merch. And plain and simply put, I can get you 10% off of your order by using this code, 100 words or less. That's the number 100 words or less. Rockabilia, they just have everything you could possibly shake a stick at. 500,000 items, great customer service, quick shipping, independently owned. It is a great company, and I encourage you to check out the website because you can type in random bands to their search bar and you will be able to find most likely their merch on there, and then you will be able to buy it and get a discount, and it is so great. But I love merch and I love this company, and I would love for you to support them as well. So again, 10% off your order, 100 words or less, and you will enjoy outfitting your closet with whatever it is you decide to purchase. Thank you, Rockabilia, and buy some band merch. And on that tip, did you, I guess, care about school? I'm guessing with your parents' occupation of, being attorneys, like education was probably important to them. So I guess, was it important to you?
Yeah. I think I had a hard time in high school, finding the correlation between like hard work and grades and like the bigger impact that had when it was time to think about, further schooling and stuff like that. So in that respect, I was a good student. I was not a great student. I think, I don't know, fairly average student. Some things I was far better than others. I was always really, really great at history. And that was, I was always, gunning to do AP Euro and AP US and Lang and Lit and stuff like that. Always gunning for that. But in like, dude, math and like science, I was like a burning train wreck. So bad. Like literally my brain could, to this day, I'm terrible at it. I think I've really enjoyed college though. College is to me is a lot more interesting and engaging as the student experience. I think is just a lot better than that of high school.
Sure.
So,
well, by that time you have a little bit more of a sense of what you're interested in, what you want to pursue. And there's a little more autonomy as opposed to, you got to take these things in order to do this thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so picking on that thread of what you're talking about, where guitar at 7 years old, like that's early. And how did it end up in your hands? Was it one of those things like you just kind of saw it and were interested in it, or how did that transpire?
Yeah. So, so my dad, my dad had a sitting in storage almost my entire childhood, a Gibson Explorer from the late 70s. And as a kid, I was like totally enamored by it. I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I had no idea how to play it, but it was the sort of thing like just like getting to hold it and like sit there with it was like a cool enough experience in of itself. So when I was about 7 years old, my dad said, Grady, if you learn how to play guitar, you can have that guitar. It can be your guitar.
Nice.
Like, what?
Yeah. You're like, really?
Yeah. So,
you took him up on it.
Yeah. Took him up on it. Started taking lessons almost immediately. I probably took lessons until I was about 11, 12, maybe 13, and then just stopped really taking them. But yeah, no, so that guitar ended up being the guitar that I used with One Step Closer for like everything, and the guitar that like I was always playing live and stuff. So it was kind of cool that it was like this weird piece of like early childhood, and like now it's like this facet of like my musical life. Sure. Like in my early young adulthood, it was like I always think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, it's a, physical manifestation of like, oh man, me picking this thing up at 7 years old and playing terribly for many years is now allowing me to go into these sweaty rooms and travel across the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like you mentioned, your entry point of kind of, more quote unquote alternative music was Blink 182. And, I absolutely love that band as well. And I think it's so important that people start to have those inflection points where they're like, oh, yes. I mean, Blink 182 is played in the radio, but like, it's a little bit different. It's not like, whatever radio rock and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So how did you start to, I guess, explore the different layers beyond Blink? I presume you just like did a lot of nerdy internet research deep dives, or how are you kind of ping-ponging?
Yeah. So, I mean, like a lot of people whose like introduction points, I think, are like those bands like Blink 182 or Green Day. You start to just by, if you're listening enough and you're paying attention enough, you start to notice the things that are a level deeper, like maybe Screeching Weasel or like all the Epitaph or like Fat Wreck stuff. But I mean, I guess how I started to fall more into punk and hardcore proper, I guess was there's a record store in Darien called Johnny's Records, and it's mostly like I mean, it carries a bit of everything, but I mean, I think its main point is like hard rock and just kind of all flavors of like what you would just consider rock music. But they had a punk and hardcore section. It was like one little like box of records, and it would always be like new represses and stuff of records and stuff. But like around I guess it would be my 7th grade year. I just started shopping there a ton, and I made 3 purchases that I deemed to be pretty pivotal in my experience. And those 3 records are Minor Threat Discography, Gorilla Biscuit's Start Today, and the most important to me was The Crew by 7 Seconds. And those records kind of like catapulted me into like, whoa, this is like the coolest thing in the world, and like my life is forever changed. I mean, in those records I was buying with like no prior knowledge of like what they even were. It was totally based on, oh, this artwork looks cool, or oh, maybe I've seen someone wearing this t-shirt before or something. So I don't know, I have kind of a pretty romanticized view of like, I don't know,
getting into those. Yeah.
I stumbled across these records in the record store and like, wow, now here I am. So,
well, I think it's really cool when you can get into records devoid of context because you are just either, you gravitate towards them based on the artwork, or like you said, you saw a t-shirt existing out there and you're pulling from the ether and you don't have any idea, and you are almost, forcing yourself to be like, well, I purchased these records. I've obviously got to listen to them and like really, really listen to them, and not just, everyone is going to make fun of the streaming generation of, I just listen to one song on Spotify and then you make up your mind. But, there's a value in that as well. But just that idea of what you're talking about of getting into stuff without anybody telling you that you should get into this is really cool.
Yeah, no. And I mean, you mentioned kind of briefly that, well, I spent my money on this record. Like I bought this record. I mean, the first time I heard Start Today, it honestly didn't really click with me.
Sure.
But it was this thing like, man, I just spent like $18 on this. I'm going to spin this like 2 more times until it kind of clicks. There's kind of just I have no idea what this is. It doesn't even necessarily make sense or like compute in my brain yet, but like, I'm just going to keep working at it until it like makes sense.
Right. Especially too, where so many records of those, bygone eras of differing recording qualities. And when you are used to a certain level of production, especially by listening to stuff on the radio, when you hear something that is not akin to any of those. You're just like, wait, what the hell am I listening to? Like, I don't this doesn't sound like it's on the, like, you understand it's not the radio, but just like sonically, it's like, where do I put this? I don't know.
Dude, no, absolutely. I mean, I can remember like, like really kind of before I discovered like those records I was talking about, I was like really into like Black Flag. And I can think about like discovering Black Flag for the first time. And I was like, oh my God, like this is the worst recording quality like I've ever heard. Like, why couldn't these guys just spend like a couple $100 more and just like record at a better studio or something? Right. So it's funny that like, yeah, you have no like framing point for like what this is. You're just like,
no, yeah. You're just like, this doesn't sound like Rise Against. Like what's
no.
No, totally. I mean, you talking about the Gorilla Biscuits experience, like I definitely remember getting into Start Today. I remember I bought Start Today and then Integrity Systems Overload. And it like you could not get a more different sounding record than both of those records stacked up against one another. But like, whatever. I was like, that's what I bought that day at the record store. And I was just like, okay, this sounds like this because of this. And yeah, I understand this came out a little bit later, but yeah, you're just totally stabbing in the dark and being like, all right, well, I got to invest this time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just I spend this money. I'm just going to work at it.
Yeah, totally. And so as you started to, get more enamored with, punk and hardcore and traveling down all of these different paths, when you, I guess, first experienced, the DIY scene and like going to local shows and, fortunately you definitely have a very, robust DIY community in that Connecticut and general Northeast area. What pulled you in towards it? Was it, just like being able to be in this small room with other people? Like, was it the energy or was it a combination of all of those things?
Yeah. So it was kind of my, my experience with like discovering like current bands and stuff. It was kind of like moving through history. Cause I mean, those first records that, I was talking about discovering like are obviously all old records. And I mean, it kind of took some time for me to realize like, oh no, this is like still a thing that's like operating and like, still very much vibrant. And it definitely took some time for me to like discover, the more local element of it. I mean, the first couple of hardcore shows I would have attended, I would have been very beginning of my freshman year. I would have just turned 15. The first couple of shows I would have attended were all in New York City. I went to, I saw Bane in Backtrack, at Webster Hall. And then I went to Black and Blue Bowl. And then I saw like Line of Sight, maybe like a month or so later. Mm-hmm. It was those shows that I went to that were like, oh, this is like the coolest thing in the world. And like, there's nothing quite like this. So I don't know, I guess, what did I like about it?
Yep.
I think, I don't know. I enjoyed the small room element of it and this kind of, not secrecy. Like it's not this like unknown thing, but it was kind of this, I understood like, this is not something that everyone knows about and understands. And, I don't know. I just enjoyed that I was being part of something so intimate and intimate in something that was, outside the path that like many kids were experiencing musically, at least in my age group. So there was just something magical about like, wow, I'm having this crazy experience that like, probably nobody at my school even understands.
Right. Which is awesome to hear, because it definitely, I think even though there are, a lot of people that are of, different iterations of the spectrum of punk and hardcore that look at it and say, punk and hardcore as a, commodifiable thing, like it's as large as it's ever has been, like,
sure.
But at the same time, like people, exactly what you're talking about, there is that regenerative aspect of, younger kids are still getting into it and finding out about it. And then having that experience of what you're saying, where it's just like, well, yeah, no matter what, like this is uniquely weird experience that if you tell your friends after you get back to school on Monday, you're like, yeah, I went to a show, and they're like what, like a movie? You're like, no, it's some bands play, like a concert. You're like, no, it's a show.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of enjoyed that it was this thing that people in my, I don't know, in my quote unquote, like normal life or real life, like couldn't quite comprehend. And it made me feel like I was part of this deeply special thing, which it is, and it was. But yeah, I mean, and then from there, I started, kind of end of my freshman year, beginning of my sophomore year, was like kind of aware, like started becoming aware that, like shows are not just this thing that like exist in like some trendy part of New York. It's like you can, there are venues in Connecticut and bands and stuff that like are hosting this same stuff. And that was really cool to like begin to feel that like regional ownership of something. You start to feel that like, no, this is truly my thing. This is something I'm a part of because it's my state. And these are bands that I know and people I know. And that sense of ownership was also really important.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that it does often get kind of lost within the, digital landscape of bands and music, where even though us on the, really nerdy molecular level of paying attention to like where bands are from and stuff like that,
Sure.
there is that element that gets lost when, band members can kind of live anywhere from that perspective and then be able to come together to, just be a band, which is fine. But how, you guys and obviously many of your peers and friends wave the flags of wherever you came from. And I think that, that's a really cool aspect of it to what you're talking about, where it's like, well, yeah, because that's how we got pulled into this, because we felt like it was our scene to, have a collective ownership over.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I have a certain affinity. Any band that is, proud of where they're from and leading with where they're from. I don't know. I think there's something really respectable about that. And I think it honestly, it makes kids in your space and scene like stoked. I mean, it's to feel like you have some sense of ownership and like that this is yours too. Like that's just, there's no feeling comparable to that. And so I think for your band not just to be banned, but to be banned from this place with these people and stuff, like I think that's an important facet of the band. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so as you started to explore this and, bring less than conventional music home to your parents, and, was your brother traveling alongside of you in this experience, or was he kind of doing his own thing?
No, he didn't have any interest in it really.
Got it.
Yeah.
So how were your parents reacting as you were clearly bringing stuff they probably didn't have a context for home?
My dad was totally open to it. It was, he drove me to all of my earliest shows. My dad was driving me to. My mom had a harder time with it. I don't know. Just it all sounds so angry. Why are you angry?
Right.
Are you angry?
Sure.
None of these people look like people I know at all. Why do you relate to them? Well, these are people you know? What do you mean? Like it was just completely unfamiliar and like had no like point of reference. It was just like totally alien. So my mom is very, very, very supportive of this path that I've gone down, and she's absolutely one of my biggest cheerleaders. She's just at its genesis point was really like, I have no idea what the hell this is.
Well, and I think that usually stems from not only do I not understand where this is coming from, but I'm also sometimes like, especially if they're seeing, stage dives and mosh pits or whatever, be like, I'm concerned for your safety, Grady. Like, are you going to be okay?
Well, I mean, that was definitely a part of it too. Is it's just like this doesn't look, safe
Right.
or like it's. I don't know. That was the big element of it too. And my mom also had a hard time understanding what talent was necessary to create this type of music. It was just, well, they're just screaming and you can't really hear the music. So it's what,
Right.
uh, you know, what, it was hard to recognize the talent necessary to create these songs and things like that. So that element of it too was a bit alien.
I'm excited to welcome a new sponsor to the show, and that is Quinn Snacks. For those of you that are unaware, you need to find Quinn Snacks immediately because they make, hands down, the best pretzel bite I have ever had in my entire life. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I swear, everybody that I have gotten to try this, mind is blown. Their peanut butter stuffed pretzels, first of all, are gluten-free. So for those of you that are on that gluten-free tip, the crunch is real. The peanut butter is so good. It is unbelievable. I have gone so far as to punish this company on Instagram to be like, man, I love what you guys do. Here's a ranking of my favorite items from you. They got pretzel bites, they have popcorn, and it's all healthy, good for you stuff. So I highly encourage you to go to quinsnacks.com. You can find the store locator or you can buy their stuff directly from the website. But trust me, try it out. You'll see it at like maybe your local grocery store from a Whole Foods perspective. I just love them so much and I want to evangelize them to you, the listener. Dive in and enjoy Quinn Snacks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are of the straight edge persuasion, correct?
Yes. Since I was 13 years old.
Wow, claiming edge at 13.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. I heard The Crew by 7 Seconds. I Googled 7 Seconds. It said they're a straight edge band. And within like 10 minutes, I was like, oh, this is what I want to be for the rest of my life. And
right.
I am now.
So did that make their any sort of reticence that your parents may have of, oh, Grady's getting into some, things that he's going to be on black tar heroin in like a couple of weeks because of his weird music? Was that like a calming, influence on their view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, early, my experience in high school was early high school. It's kind of the first time that kids are having access to drugs or alcohol or anything like that. So, I mean, it was, kids that I was going to high school with were just kind of going crazy in that respect all the time. And, you were hearing all sorts of stories from it through so-and-so got suspended or this party happened and the police came or something like that. And so for my parents to like understand that I was like never a part of that, that was a calming, like, okay, well, he's into this really unconventional thing. And I don't really understand it, but like, there's this really positive element of it too. Oh, and he wants to stop eating animals and stuff. So there's like a moralistic element to it too. Like, I don't know. I think they could respect that I was thinking hard about things in that regard, even if they aesthetically or musically couldn't really wrap their heads around it.
Sure. They're like, something positive is coming out of this. So this is good. He's at least thinking about things.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And from what I can understand, you Anxious got their start. Like you were literally practicing in your parents' basement and stuff like that. Is that correct or no?
Yeah. It's so I started Anxious right about when I turned 15. And it was, we just practiced at my parents' house a couple days a week and stuff like that.
Was that technically, is Anxious your first band from that perspective, or had you messed around with other stuff before that?
Yeah, no, I've thought about this before, and it's you hear, I feel like whenever I go like on tour with a band or something, it always comes up like, man, what was your first band? Like,
of course,
what was your first terrible band? And like,
you're listening to it.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'm still playing in it actually. I had a very, very short-lived band in middle school before it, but like played 2 shows and it wasn't really a thing. So I would consider like Anxious like was my first band.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, yeah, at 15, like, I mean, getting out and playing shows when you're, 11 or 12, like, not everybody's Sammy Siegler. So, like, that's
Yeah, no, absolutely.
um, and so as your parents started to see you, become engaged with this, and like, were they, like you said, both your parents were very supportive over you playing music and stuff like that and creatively expressing yourself. Was your house kind of ground zero for everybody to kind of collect and, hang out and play video games after practice and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a hangout point. And as I got older, it became more and more that hangout point. I mean, as Anxious started to shift more into like what it is today, I mean, I would say that Anxious has gone through like a million evolutionary stages, and it's like a total pain in the ass to track. But it's like, as I got a little bit older, like more junior and senior in high school, and like we sort of like started linking up with OSC, and we were hanging out all the time. Like when they would play Connecticut or we would play Connecticut, it was always just like hanging out at my house, playing Fortnite and hanging out. It was a good time.
It's so cool because you just hear these different, it's like, whatever, when I was playing in bands around your age, you're like, we would hang out and we would play like, GoldenEye and the N64 or whatever. Like, it's just, it's the same idea. It's just like, oh yeah, it's a different first person shooter. It's fine, guys. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, some things are universal, I guess. And video games and hanging out are probably one of those things.
It's very true. That will last us until this earth stops spinning.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess your experience in regards to, excuse me, playing guitar, obviously in One Step Closer, and then singing in Anxious. Like, did you feel like one, I mean, clearly you do both, but like, was one a more natural fit in regards to you feeling like, oh, I could do this immediately, or I needed to kind of warm up to my position in the band, like, or were they both relatively like, oh, okay, I feel like I can, muddle along and get okay with both?
Yeah. I mean, Anxious has always been a more of a place of comfort just from as performing wise. I mean, I used to play guitar in Anxious, and I haven't since our first 7-inch came out, but that has always felt pretty natural. My time in One Step Closer, it's always I don't know, it's when I first joined, it was definitely I don't know what I'm doing and I'm not good enough to be here, and I have to work on this a lot to get to a point where I'm proficient or at least able to bullshit that I know what I'm doing. So that took a lot of work in a way that I think like singing in Anxious didn't take as much time.
Got it. I mean, you're just able to with Anxious and singing, you just tapped into your previous theater experience. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So maybe something, I don't know. Yeah.
No.
And so, I mean, like you said, you guys are, on the eve of releasing, your first record as far as Anxious is concerned. And, you've been able to experience, a few tours across the country and stuff like that. Did you like tour as you started to experience it on a more national level beyond just kind of weekend warrior stuff?
Good question. I loved it when I first started doing it. I mean, the longest tour I had done through high school was maybe like 4 days. And then, my senior year, One Step Closer and Anxious did our full US together, which was like, looking back on it, like insane. It was like 28 days and we did all the Have Heart shows, Sound and Fury, This Is Hardcore, and just a bunch of insane stuff between. And that was like crazy. And I loved getting to do that. I mean, me and Ryan booked it ourselves. And so in that way, it was like kind of crazy. Like none of the routing made sense. All the drives sucked. We didn't have any places to stay, nor the money really to stay anywhere if we didn't have friends. And so it was just kind of this batshit crazy tour. And then, but I loved it. I mean, I loved it. And then, kind of the following year, I started, getting to understand what like real touring is like, with like real people booking it and stuff like that. And, I had a real love for that. And then, I've done two full USs, since, the world has reopened, and, some short touring in between. And, I like it, but it's funny. I think the pandemic has I've definitely experienced it. I've talked to a couple other people who seem to experience it as well, but it's, I enjoy my time at home more, and B, I enjoy my time alone more. So, in that regard, touring has become a little bit more difficult, just in a way of, man, I really, it's kind of tough that I don't have like just 2 hours to go spend by myself right now. I mean, I could just go walk down a street for an hour or something, but that's not the same as like, yeah, I'm laying in my bed and just like listening to a record, or like reading, or like just even scrolling mindlessly on my phone. But that said, I really do enjoy getting to tour, and it's like, I don't know, I can't help but always feel like kind of grateful for the opportunity, because I don't know, so many bands, so many people in so many bands, like, would die for the opportunity to tour. And
Yeah.
It's,
well, and
I'm always really grateful for the fact that, like, man, I'm out in California right now, and I'm just getting to do this kind of just cause. So
yeah, for sure. And I definitely think framing it up like that is appropriate, because regardless of whether or not, tour fits into a personal, like mental health state or well-being, like, if a person is introverted, like touring is kind of a nightmare for them. They're like, I can't escape anybody. Like, I'm surrounded.
Yeah.
And so just that idea of like, oh, it's a, crazy fun party all night, and you meet so many new people, and like all of that is true. But then all of the other side is true as well, where it's like, it's a lot of hurrying up and wait, and, all of the things you don't see, the unglamorous side of touring, like that is a reality as well. They can both be true at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's, that's kind of been something like I've really been trying to tell myself, because, we've, in these past two tours I've done, I've kind of been going like, man, like, is it wrong that I'm going, man, I really would like some time to myself, or like, just some time at my house or something. And it's, I take solace in like being able to tell myself that both things are true. You can be like super stoked on the opportunity and super thankful for it, and also be going, yeah, this is a lot. There's some really hard elements of that. So it's useful to be able to tell yourself both sides of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the dreaded question that I'm sure will get posed to you, bare minimum, like 400,000 times, is the playing in two bands and like being able to balance like the lifestyles from that perspective.
Sure.
I know that because you guys are both bands are existing on this platform where, you signed to the same record label, and, there's a lot of the business implications behind both the bands, same manager, all that sort of stuff. Like there's a balance that can be struck with that. But I'm sure you guys have maybe had discussions about like how that would look like if people aren't able to do certain tours because these certain things are, happening and the overlap is there. Have you guys been able to have discussions about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's always been something that we've had to be very honest about. I mean, in total transparency, I haven't been able to do much of the touring that I would like to with One Step Closer. For a long time, it was because of school. And then, more recently, it's just, both bands at this point, kind of have like the next 5-6 months planned out. And it's like, you look at it and you go, we're touring like completely on top of each other. This doesn't make any sense. And I mean, it's not something like I've really like I mean, it's very, very recent, but as of, last month, I'm actually not in One Step Closer anymore. And there's no bad blood or like ill feelings there. It's just, yeah, this literally just,
I can't be in two places at once. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So it has been a conversation. It'll probably be less of a conversation now as I'm no longer playing with the band.
No, that's true. I mean, yeah, at a certain point, like that would need to give, just because, yeah, there are, especially when both bands are pursuing it as hard as you guys are both doing, like there's no reason to kill yourself personally over that. So I would, at this point, I would suggest you quit one of the bands. You're like, it's okay, I already solved it, Ray, no problem.
No, got us covered in that.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I will willfully bow out. We were mentioning off mic I'm really interested in the Dying Tradition newsletter, and like you said, this clearly a labor of love, and being able to document these things that you're passionate about, specifically within Connecticut hardcore, of like, here's the bands of the past, but then also here's this cool stuff that's happening now. Was that just like kind of spawned off of an idea that you were like, well, I want to do this in this, really sort of old fashioned medium of, a newsletter? How did that all kind of, I guess, get kickstarted in your brain?
So Dying Tradition, it started, two issues of like a formal zine were made before it started as a newsletter. One was a zine for FYA, and then the other was for the One Step Closer record release. But it started in its newsletter capacity for the Anxious record release for our first 7-inch. And it's, it was, Connecticut, to me, it's a really cool place. But when I first started it just kind of felt a little bit disjointed. It's like, it's this super small scene, but it felt like there was like kind of this weird disconnect between certain scenes and bands and people and things like that. So I kind of wanted to start it as like this like holistic view of like the state, and just like, here's all these awesome things that are going on currently, and here are all the shows going on in case you didn't know that you should come to. But then, kind of right before the pandemic, I started it as a monthly thing that I would mail out. And it was just a yearning to like document like these Connecticut bands from both today, but also, mainly from, the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that I thought were, maybe otherwise like not having a light shined on them. And I don't know, I think I just really enjoy print media. I've always been a huge zine guy. Like I really love zines. So I was just like, well, I don't want to do like a blog post or like an Instagram or something like that. I was like, I want to make a zine about it. So yeah, I mean, I started just kind of mailing it out, and it kind of like snowballed into this thing that was like a lot bigger than I thought it would be. Like when it started out, I was sending it to about 25 people, and almost all of them lived in Connecticut.
Sure.
But by the time I by the time I mailed my last issue out, it was going like out to over 300 people, kind of all across the world, which was fucking insane.
Yeah. You're like, really? You want to read about tenfold? Okay, cool.
Dude, I crazy, crazy that all these people want to read about a band that maybe 3 people really care about. So yeah. I mean, it was totally a labor of love. Because I mean, I did the poor copy, cut and paste layout myself, and I would mail it all out myself for free, which got super expensive
especially international shipping, right?
Dude, I know it's 3 stamps to send one thing internationally. So
sure.
So it's
yeah.
So it the last issue I sent out was in March, but as of this week, I'm almost finished with issue 14. So it will be making its return hopefully around this Friday.
Well, that's awesome. I just really, I mean, the reason I wanted to highlight that in particular was just because I mean, the same way that, vinyl records ebb and fade. I mean, clearly they are very popular now, but, for whatever, 10 years ago, you couldn't give them away. And just that physical manifestation, I think, especially within the context of punk, hardcore, DIY music, people are always going to want that tangible thing that they can hold and, pour an insane amount of attention over, like you said, to bands that are just like, oh, cool. Like, we're going to talk about Sum of All Fears for 15 pages. And you're just like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're doing right now. So it's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the tangible experience is important, and it makes it kind of like this voluntary, involved experience as well. Like, it's not just passively reading something, on Instagram or something. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, it feels a little bit self-serving, but I mean, it was, man, this is a handwritten, hand-addressed envelope that's stamped on the back, and there's a letter inside that says, thank you for grabbing this. See you at the next one. And then, this one-page sort of thing. I don't know. To me, it felt personal and cool in a way that I think those stories and those bands and stuff, it makes it stick in a way that I think it wouldn't otherwise if it just existed online or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. I mean, all that stuff is cool to consume. I mean, we, between you and I, we probably follow an absurd amount of, retrospective Instagram accounts of, show flyers and stuff, but it does feel different when, it is in some physical manifestation. And honestly, that's why I think it's so cool. You're doing these really elaborate and interesting packaging processes for Anxious, where it's like, I can't tell you how much I really cannot stand collecting 7-inches anymore in my life. But then the fact that you guys did a really cool children's book attached to the 7-inch, I was like, well, all right, they got me. Looks like I got to buy this one.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That was literally what it was. Just, I don't know, we've done 7-inches before, and so many 7-inches come out. How do you make, this single experience that stands out, and not just cool, another 7-inch that maybe the diehard collectors will feel the need to grab, but everyone else maybe not so much. So, I mean, it was just, how do you make this a cool, personal, interesting experience?
Hey, it worked for me, Grady. You got me, dude. The last thing I want to hit. Yes, exactly. The last thing I want to hit on was the fact that I know, just based off of previous internet research, that you are indeed a record collector head, and like you said, you mentioned when you were purchasing these records, I presume you were talking about that you were actually purchasing vinyl of those records, the Minor Threat and 7 Seconds and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Sure, and. So I get, for one, I guess what drew you to that medium initially, was it just the fact that these look cool and the art is bigger? And then, why do you still collect records?
Because it's the coolest goddamn thing in the world.
Yes, I agree.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's for all those reasons. It's cool to pour over the art and the layout and the lyrics and the thank yous and the pictures and the cool bonus items and stuff that come with it. I mean, I'm not trying to be negative, streaming is a bad way to consume music or anything, but it's not bad. It's great. It's never been easier to consume music, but it's definitely not personal. And I think that, physical music and getting to pour over all those things is it's a really cool way to feel connected to a band that, might be from the other side of the world, or you might never ever meet or talk to or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. It's a really cool way to feel connected to a band. So I think that's kind of what drew me in. And then, I don't know, collecting is really fun. I've always kind of had that urge. And so it's fun to collect records and bands and variants and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then it's obviously a blessing and a curse because the moment that you need to take them anywhere besides the room that you've placed them in, it's the worst thing.
It's the worst thing in the world.
Right. And I think and the reason I take pot shots at 7 inches is just because like they are, they're a pain in the butt to listen to because you obviously have to flip them every, 7 minutes. And it's just like, I think we've evolved past the point of 7 inches where, how about we just do a one-sided 12-inch, guys? Can we just do that?
Well, I think so many people feel the same way. And I think so many labels and stuff are phasing out the 7-inch in the way of just a one-sided 12-inch.
Right. Yeah. And because I don't, and to be clear too, I also don't I'm not a tape stan. Like I have tapes, but I don't collect them. I don't need them in my life. So it's usually one or the other. People gravitate towards one-sided 12-inch or a tape.
Dude, I love tapes. Like tape, I'm a huge tape head. I mean, that's.
Do you go down are you collecting, colored case variants and stuff like that?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm
okay.
No, I think of a band, like if a new band comes out, like I want you to make a demo tape and stuff like that. I mean,
demo tapes are cool. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, like I think there's like no cooler introductory point to like a new band than like getting a tape in the mail and like pulling it out and, seeing what they did for like the layout and stuff like that and for the art and then like popping it in and maybe it sounds like shit, but it's a really cool way to like be introduced to a band.
Yeah.
So I'm a tape fan and I'll argue for the sake of tapes.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. You're carrying on your parents' tradition and, being a litigator in the pro tape category. Yeah. Or maybe we just like throw it, not I was going to say even further back, but maybe we can just talk about like burn CDs,
Oh my God, dude. No, that is the one. I feel like maybe a year and a half, maybe even more recently, like people were trying to bring that back. Like, yeah, we're doing a CD for this release or something. I'm just like, I don't want this. Yeah. I'm not going to buy this. A CD? Why? Why would I buy this? So CD is the one format that I'm like, I'm totally good.
Yeah, right. You're like, I'm tapped out. Yep, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Well, Grady, thank you for hanging out. I really appreciate you letting me ping pong around your brain and be able to talk about all this stuff. So thanks for hanging, man.
Dude, absolutely. Thank you so much. This was a really, really fun interview to do.
Oh boy, wasn't that a treat? Isn't Grady just a sweet human being? I felt like I formed a friendship, and I hope that you will go up to him after, they play a show and he's selling merch and you're like, Grady, I heard you on 100 Words podcast and you seem like a nice guy. Let's be friends. I know that he would love that because that's essentially what I did because I saw Anxious play, I don't know, it was probably about a month and a half before we had this conversation. And I was like, Grady, we're going to have an interview in like a month. He's like, oh man, that's so exciting. And it was very cool. So thank you very much, Grady. Thank you very much to James Goodson, his publicist for the band. And I always like to give shout outs to publicists because they're doing the Lord's work out there. Anyways, next week, I have another fun discussion with Jeff Codhill from Game Face. If you are not familiar with Game Face, please do your homework before this episode. But Game Face looms large in my own personal musical upbringing, being in the mid to late 90s punk and hardcore scene. Game Face played a lot of shows and they did a lot of things and they put out a lot of music. And Jeff is still very prolific in putting out a lot of cool solo music on his own. And then Game Face is doing some stuff coming up shortly. So I had to have Jeff on, and that's what we did. So that's what we got next week. Until then, please be safe, everybody.
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches.
Urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home. at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.
Attention shoppers, we now have taste in the bread aisle. Dave's Killer Bread. That's right, an organic bread that's no longer a sedative for your taste buds. Dave's Killer Bread is on a mission to make the most of the loaf, to rid the world of GMOs, high fructose corn syrup, and artificial ingredients, and plant the seeds of good in all that they bake. Killer taste, killer texture, and always organic. Dave's Killer Bread. Bread amplified.
UFOs, psychic powers, chemtrails. To learn about mysterious events, you listen to the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know podcast. And here's where it gets crazy. Now you can read all about your favorite conspiracy theories in the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book from the creators of the podcast. Dive into a smart, witty explanation of the unexplainable, packed with amazing illustrations. Available now. Order today at StuffYouShouldReadBooks.com or wherever you buy your books.